Good morning. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to beautiful Cape Town. Who is from out of town? Wow, okay. Who is from out of the country? Let me just pick on a few people as we start. Oh, we've already spoken. Who are you and where are you from? I know that, but tell us.
My name is Herbert and I'm from Italy.
You work for?
The United Nations.
Fantastic.
Carl, I've flown in from Mogadishu in Somalia, and I'm working with the UN.
Okay, super. Now, no one else is going to volunteer because you see what I'm doing with the microphone. But anyone else would just like to tell us where you're from, an exotic, exciting country, somewhere in Africa? You can just shout it out or stand up and raise your hand. Anyone? No? Yes, here we go. Tell us quickly.
Hi, good morning. Johan Steyn, I'm from the Netherlands. I work for Fourkites.
Fantastic. Welcome. Really, my hope for us all today is that we learn a lot from each other. Isn't it nice to actually see people again, face to face? I think I've been so tired of conferences, and then COVID happened. Last year I did 31 conferences where I spoke, but it was all virtual. And it is quite comfortable because you just put on a nice sir-looking shirt 5 minutes before the time. You don't have to travel anywhere, you live in a hotel on your own where you know no one, but you can't see anyone. And something I realized in this time is that there are certain things that technology cannot automate. It cannot automate human nature, our basic human needs, our needs to connect, to look you in the face, to pick up your micro expressions, even if I don't realize I'm doing it, to see if I can trust you, to see if you can help me and if I can help you. The technology is fantastic, but it will never replace what we have here today. It will never replace in-person meetings. It will not replace our ability to think critically, our ability to use our experience. You can't automate experience, okay? And I'm going to talk a lot about technology today. And people who were in my earlier session the other day will know the answer of this, but what are one of the main things, and I often tell this to customers, what are one of the main things you cannot automate with technology? Any volunteers, you can just shout it out. There's most likely a lot. Say again? Emotion, that's very, very true. So things that's very human. Anything else that we can't automate? Eating. Well, yes. Unless you're lying there on your couch and you've got a robot feeding you, you know. The one thing you can't automate, and I'll touch on that today, is stupidity, okay? And so I work with a lot of customers, mostly banking, financial services, insurance, and with the big telcos as a management consultant. I've been in this artificial intelligence space for the last 5-6 years. So I find that it is quite easy to get a client meeting because AI is kind of a sexy topic. So a lot of customers will ask me to come and speak to them, either their C-suite, the execs, or certain divisional leaders. And the meeting almost always starts with, we need to use AI, help us. I then ask the boardroom to do what? Okay? And that's when the meeting becomes a little bit weird. Because they either have a KPI from the top, you have to implement AI or robotics or cloud or edge, we can use all of these terms. By the end of the year, and 30% of your processes should be digitized or use AI. So they just find anything to digitize to make sure they hit their targets, their KPIs. In the last 6 years, every meeting that started off with help us to use artificial intelligence, I've only done one implementation of AI technologies. I've done many more, but I'm talking about these meetings that starts like that. Most meetings, the result or the solution was, it's a toxic culture. People hate working there. People don't understand their jobs. People fear losing their jobs, not just because of this pandemic we've been through, but we hear about automation, we hear about robotics. We think that it's an industrial robot that's going to walk down the aisle and come and sit at my desk. And they often, and there's some technical people here today, I always say we need our technical people, our machine learning engineers, our quants, our data scientists, But these initiatives are almost always led by the technology people. And it does not address the business problem. Okay, if your culture is toxic, AI can't help you. If people don't understand their jobs or fear for their jobs, AI can't help you. If you need to upskill your people for a digital future, AI can't really help you. So one of the things I'd love to leave with you today is how powerful this technology is, where it is going, or where it's been and where it's going. At the end of my presentation, I want to just give you a few fairly common sense first steps to use this technology. As business leaders, we don't all have to be AI experts, machine learning engineers, but we have to understand this technology. Last year's survey globally said that 70% of senior business leaders don't understand this new wave of technology at all. So they rely on the technical people to help them. The problem with that is you don't achieve your business objectives. Because the technical people will get a new tool, robotics, AI or something. They're going to look for something to fix with it. Okay. And a lot of these initiatives fall flat. You lose cadence. People are not excited about it because we're trying to automate the wrong things and the like. All right, so I'll cover all of that. Let me quickly read you the first line from my favorite book by my favorite author. It's going to make no sense now. Some of you might know who this is. You also might know this person, Eric Arthur Blair, by his pen name, but please don't spoil it for the rest of us. It was a bright, cold day in April, and the clocks were striking 13. It was written in 1948. And I'm going to leave that with you to think about it, but we'll come back to it. Okay. One of the challenges I have when I speak with customers and in conferences like this is that I often have people afterwards saying they don't believe what I'm saying. And that's okay, because then we can talk about it and debate. With this kind of technology, there is a lot of hype. There's a lot of stuff on YouTube and elsewhere about killer robots, about the weaponization of this technology, which is a reality already, smart drones and the like, about everyone's going to lose their job one day. It could happen. But I just find that a lot of people I speak with are not waking up to the fact of where this new breed of technology is taking us. And we can either approach it as something we fear or as something we can embrace and use. You know, all new innovations through the ages always was a double-edged sword. It can cause great harm, it can be used for horrible things in the wrong hands, or it can really serve humanity. So I'm going to ask you a question as we start. So firstly, what is your view of artificial intelligence? And for those Terminator fans in here, you might recognize this picture. And I'm doing this to make sure we are on the same page. And it's okay to have different views, but through especially Hollywood movies and the media, we have some sort of an impression about this technology. And that impression will dictate how we approach it. Do we shun away from it? Do we embrace it? Are we too enthusiastic about it? Are we going to burn our fingers? Do we fear it so much that we don't want to hear anything about this in our businesses? So we don't have a survey. We wanted to do Mentimeter. It's not working. So I'm talking about the most important technology we've ever made, but I couldn't get my Mentimeter slides to work. So it happens. Okay, some people think this. Most of you, or many of you, might think this. All right? Second picture I want to show you is computer code. In other words, is it ambivalent? Is AI, like any other technology, just something that we create? It's neither good nor bad, but in the wrong hands it can be very evil, in the right hands it can be very good. Or thirdly, is AI something for good? Is it like this cute little robot? It can really help us, it can help our children in educating them, it can help us in healthcare, and the like. So think of this. Now I'm going to ask you just to raise your hands. I'm not going to ask anyone for questions, but it will just be interesting. So those who think, and there are no right and wrong answers, those who think it is an evil robot, just put up your hand. No one. Okay. Unless I don't have my glasses on, so I can't really see. Who thinks it's a great, cute robot? It's the best thing that's ever happened. It's really, really, really going to help us. Any hands? Okay, there's quite a few. And who thinks it's neutral, ambivalent? It is simply just code. It's not monsters. It doesn't have smoke coming out of its nose. Okay, great. Now, 3 years ago when I started using this slide for a lot of my talks, most people picked the evil monster. Okay. The fact, and I expected this response, the fact that because actually the really, really right answer is, it is just code, it is neutral. It also shows that people are educating themselves, they're reading, you are accessing the right kind of source material, you're not just trusting Hollywood, you're not just trusting the people that say it's the best thing since sliced bread. So remember this technology, and later on, as I said, I'm going to bring it to more practical in our day-to-day lives and our businesses. The technology is neutral. It is, however, the most powerful technology we've ever created. It will most likely in the years to come lead to our downfall. Now, I was always very optimistic about this technology, and to a large extent, I still am, especially if I see how people that I know use it in healthcare, use it in cancer scans, use it in rural areas where there's no medical equipment, but they have a handheld scan for prostate or breast scans and the like. They immediately get a result through the cloud. So there's a lot of good. There's a lot of good in training our children. We've got unique challenges in our country where a lot of people don't have access to services, don't have access to adequate electricity, and especially not access to connectivity. You know, I was on a webinar once on a panel discussion. Now, many years ago, I did quite a lot of community work, living in the townships around Johannesburg and Pretoria for a year, living in people's homes and shacks, and it was a wonderful but eye-opening experience. And this one person on the panel said, there's no more excuse not to upskill yourself. It's on YouTube, we've got Udemy, we've got internet, we've all got smartphones and the like. And we were talking in the context of rural South Africa. And I said to him, have you been in a township, ever? And I'm not talking about the Apartheid Museum in Soweto. I'm talking about like really there where it's in the dirt, where many from you are from or grew up in even, where there is, and I said, do you know that they may or may not even have a phone? And if it's a phone, it's most likely not a smartphone. And it's most likely 6 or 7 people using the phone. They study by candlelight, a lot of these kids. They might not even have electricity and most likely not connectivity. So it's those biases that we often have when we approach this technology. I mean, the internet is there, just use it, just upskill yourself, just get off your butt and don't be lazy. But in our world, and especially in our country, we have socioeconomic issues that, again, we can't just automate away. So when it comes to your workers, and I'll touch on that as well, automation will inevitably lead to job displacements. In our country, every wage earner, on average, looks after 6 or 7 other people easily. So if you want to get rid of 10 people because you're automating, it's not just those 10 people. The challenge is we don't live in a la-la land because you have shareholders, you've got targets, you're running a business, you know, and not some charity. So how do we do this smartly from a business point of view and ethically from an importance of people perspective? So yes, it's neutral and it's just code. Oh, well, I've given the answer already. This was 4 o'clock this morning, hence it. Okay, let's go back to that again. Anyone have an idea what book this is? Can just say it out loud. 1984. So Arthur Eric Blair's pen name was George Orwell. I'm sure many of you have read Animal Farm, even if it was in school. Remember, all animals are equal, but some are more equal than others. Okay? He wrote a lot in his time about the Soviet era and about communism and about the world as he saw it. He fought in the Spanish Civil War, and there he was really faced with the brutality of war and the brutality of what people can do with each other. In 1948, when he finally wrote 1984, he was a dying man. Him and his adopted son went to the island of Jura in Scotland, where there was not much, and he actually could sit down and write this book. And he was in a rush because he had tuberculosis and he was terminal. And he died not very long after publishing this book. Now, in 1984, we know from things like the Thought Police, Big Brother's watching us. You know, so is it just a story, or is there more? Did he see a time, our time, in writing his fictional piece of work? And I'll touch on that now. So one of the things that he talks about is this telescreen. Who hasn't read 1984? There's a few, and that's okay. I normally don't read fiction because it irritates me, but the more I study AI, the more I read Orwell, because he's touching on a few things. So he spoke, I've got 3 slides, but I'm just going to read you some paragraphs from his books. This all now is to set the scene of where this technology has been and where it's going. And then toward the end, as I said, I'm going to start making it more practical. I don't want to just do like a university lecture because you're all going to walk out of here and say, oh, that's cool, but where do we start? Okay. So I'm just going to read this quickly with you. The voice came from an oblong metal plaque, like a dulled mirror, which formed part of the surface of the right-hand wall. The instrument, the telescreen it was called, could be dimmed, but there was no way of shutting it off completely. So in the book, Winston, who's the main character, there's this telescreen in everyone's room so that the government can spy on you. The difference between then and now is at least they really knew the government was spying on them. I think we're busy figuring it out at the moment. The more powerful the technology, the more this can be done, all right? The telescreen received and transmitted simultaneously. Any sound that Winston made would be picked up by it. There was, of course, no way of knowing whether you were being watched at any given moment. And then the last paragraph, he thought of the telescreen with its never-sleeping ear. They could spy upon you night and day, but if you kept your head, you could still outwit them. With all their cleverness, they had never mastered the secret of finding out what another human being was thinking. All right. Lovely metaphor. We are constantly under surveillance. I'm sure many of you have experienced this. Because we always have our phones, our smartphones with us. You talk about camping or rugby. What suddenly happens in your Facebook feed? So we're constantly being listened to, and we don't need 10 million contact center agents to do this. The AI can do it. They interpret what you're saying. They form a whole profile on who you are. We are more known now, who we really are, what we're thinking, whom we are associating with, than at any time in the history of humanity. Now imagine that power in the wrong hands. Well, imagine that power in anyone's hands. I don't want that. All right, so we've touched on 1984. One of the things that George Orwell alludes to, and I love this quote, he says, what if the telescreen or the TV I am looking at is looking back at me? 1948, he wrote that. Most of us have smart televisions, most of us have smartphones, some of us have smart fridges and smart speakers. I've got a Google Home. My son is 8. I've now taught him how to cheat, if you would, with his homework, because he can ask, hey Google, what's the answer for whatever, whatever. And this device, who remembers Dragon Dictate, the software, the dictating software of many years ago? Okay. Remember how you had to train it for hours and hours and hours on end to pick up your specific sentiments, your own accent and the like? These days, if you use Siri or Alexa or any of these devices, I think unless you have a really weird accent or speak in a really funny way, it will pick up what you're saying. But it will also pick up the sentiment. So it won't just transcribe the words. It will actually understand what you're saying because of what you mean behind it, levels of frustration and the like. All right, so we are constantly being monitored. So look at some of these quotes in the news. So who's the biggest culprit of spying on us? Mark Zuckerberg, who's one of the first people that covers his mobile or his computer's camera. There is a lesson in there, okay? We saw some of the Snowden revelations some years back. We are constantly being surveilled. And the balancing act here is, because there is a security element to this as well. You know, I would rather go, I'm going to the airport this afternoon. I would like for there to be facial recognition software to pick up known terrorists, to pick up on people's demeanor, maybe how they walk, certain facial expressions, whether there's ill intent or not. You know, I'd love to be safe, especially when it comes to my boy. And I think parents feel like that. But what do we give up for that safety? Constant surveillance. You know, we've heard a lot over the years about data privacy. You know, in Europe, you've got the GDPR. Here we've got POPIA or POPI, however people pronounce it. So you can't just use my data for anything. You have to use it responsibly. You have to anonymize it. You have to securely store it. But my face is also my data. If you use facial recognition technology, without my consent, you're breaking that law. Most companies don't care about that because we have government surveillance on the streets and then we have private surveillance near corporate head offices, for instance. Okay. The problem with all of this, and something that we'll touch on a lot, and we should, is the biases in data. And facial recognition is a great example of that. The last, was it 2 or so years ago, where we saw a lot of false arrests in the US, where they would just walk up to somebody and say, the AI said, you are that person. The challenge with facial recognition technology, it struggles with female faces and with darker skin tones. And you know why? Because it's a bunch of white guys in Silicon Valley that creates the software, okay? That's the truth. Because we all have biases. So when you use this kind of technology, you should have a team that's multi-gender, multicultural, multi-ethnic, because it's so easy to mean well when you write certain algorithms. But of course, you're not going to think how it's going to impact another gender or somebody from another part of the world or the like. So the idea of responsible AI, of ethical AI in everything we do is very important. Now, almost done with looking back, you've all most likely seen slides similar to this, the so-called industrial revolutions. By the way, I love to speak more about the smart technology era than artificial intelligence, because AI is one part of this bigger ecosystem of new technologies, all right? So, again, you've seen this, but are we in South Africa not still in the second industrial revolution, do you think? Electricity supply, okay? Now, there's a lot of people I know, and there's a lot of government initiatives doing great work to get connectivity to people and to schools, to teach children how to code and use robotics and the like. But unless we fix some of our fundamental societal issues, I almost want to say we can forget about all this AI stuff. AI is not going to put food on the table. Hungry children cannot learn. My sister is a social worker in one of the schools in Pretoria West, which is a very poor area. And most of those kids, she tells me, their only meal per day is the meal they get at school. I don't want to imagine what they went through during lockdown when they couldn't go to school. A lot of those children come from gender-based violence, homes and the like. So we can jump on our little ivory tower. I'm speaking to myself here about all this great tech, and it's important, we have to explore it. But when it comes to the future of our children, the wellness of our society and the like, there's a lot more than just click a button and automate the stuff. How will it impact your workers and their families is an important consideration. So now we're in the so-called fourth industrial revolution, the smart technology era. We are heading to the fifth already. Okay, so we're still struggling in the second in this country. We're still figuring out the fourth, but it's changing so quickly. So let me just get to looking forward, the so-called trajectory of this technology. And I like using this picture. Some years back, most of us would sit, the only thing you could do was sit at your desk at a PC or later on a laptop. Laptop is okay, you could pick it up and walk to a meeting room, but you still needed that device to access your company network or later on the internet. Then we started using mobile phones that became smartphones. So we moved from sitting at the thing to carrying it around in our hands. Many of us today are wearing smart watches, wearables. Powerful devices, even more powerful than the mobile phone was 5, 6, 7 years ago. So sitting in it, carrying it in my hand, wearing it on my body. Wearables is also interesting when it comes to medical use, you know. So not just your reading your heart rate and seeing if you are about to get sick and the like, but heart rate monitors and the like, yes, those are implants. But where we're getting is what they call the brain-computer interface, and it's not science fiction. Devices implanted in our brains, and again, double-edged sword. It can either really help with people who have lost their hearing or their eyesight and other problems, people who are suffering from dementia, for instance. And what's the problem on the other side of that double-edged sword? If I have a device in my brain, you can read my thoughts, because that's the most personal part of me, you know. And there's that quote again from Orwell. Because in those days in these books, they couldn't read their thoughts. Our thoughts are already being read. And that's why I have a mobile phone picture on there. And I'll get to the brain implants now. So much of our view of the world is influenced by our social media feed. We saw what happened in the 2016 election in the US, and on whichever side of that argument you stand. But I mean, our social media feeds are essentially learning about us, the sites we visit, the comments we make, our profile, and then what do they want? They want you to spend as much time as possible on that social media platform. So they start bombarding you with things that actually confirms your biases. All right, so that's why there are people, this QAnon people, and again, some people here might believe in it or not, but in my opinion, there's lizards and there's child breeding rings and stuff, and they're part of the US government. I don't know, maybe not. But people are religious about it. It's almost like a religious fundamentalism, because my whole worldview, think of this, in an age where we can access all the information that mankind has ever created, we're becoming more and more isolated, because this technology is telling us what we want to hear, and it's forming us in our own little bubbles where we should be more connected than ever. We're becoming more and more disconnected. So that's a big problem. Now, implants in the brain, our own South African boykie, although he was, 6 when he left for America, Elon Musk. Love his work, by the way. But this year, if they get FDA approval, they will do the first brain implants in humans with this technology. It's already been tested on animals and primates. It's actually quite a small incision. In fact, you don't even need to be under anesthesia to get it. Huge benefits, big problems around privacy. In China, we already have what they call the social credit scoring system. I don't know if you've read about it. So the way I behave as a citizen determines my access to credit. So if I say things on social media that's against the regime, or North Korea as well, imagine that. If I associate with the wrong kind of people, because with my geospatial tracking on my mobile phone, you know where I am, and with other mobile phones around me, you know who I am associating with. So if I don't behave, I'm not going to get the best that the government can offer me. Best schools for my kids and the like. But the bad part of that is the punishment that can come because of that. So imagine you live in North Korea. It's one thing to pay lip service to the leader, But what if what you think can be read? Because you most likely think, I don't want to use a swear word, but is it that, okay? So you can read my thoughts. Imagine the future of democracy if you can influence my thoughts. Our thoughts are already being influenced because of the mobile phone networks and social media. I read once that democracy is the engineering of consent. It's quite an interesting definition to think about. But our consent would be engineered through placards on the lampposts and television and the like. Now, this thing that we're carrying in our hand all day, our consent is being engineered through that as well. We're not as free as we think we are already. Now, it'll get more exciting. You don't have to all look so depressed. But it's just, again, that wake-up call of where this technology is going. So, now it's going to get even worse, but then we're going to change the tone a bit. The metaverse. In every newspaper, on every blog, we hear about the metaverse. Okay, I think to a large extent it's still more hype than reality. We know that Facebook changed their name to Meta. We know that when you are in the metaverse and with your goggles, your augmented reality goggles, there's a lot of benefits in training people, especially people who work with their hands, like doctors, for instance, or builders or the like. But where they want to take this technology is that we actually live in the metaverse more and more and not in the real world. I saw a book on my Amazon feed the other day, Sex in the Metaverse. Okay? I'm tempted to read it because I can't imagine that, Okay? So it's the metaverse. Then we've got nanotechnology already a reality. I mean, a nanometer is like 100th of a piece of paper width or something like that. I might have it wrong, but it's so small. We already have, in reality, nanobots that can be used in people's bodies that can contain a little piece of medicine and self-propelled swims or propeller. I mean, those you can't even see it with your eye almost. Swims to an area where there's cancer growth, for instance, or something, delivers into those cells that medicine and swims back or eventually is discarded by the body. That is a reality. It's being done in many parts of the world already. Swimming through your brain, fixing certain things. Imagine that. So a robot in my bloodstream, a reality already. Artificially generated body parts, 3D printed body parts, okay? It's already a reality. It's not mainstream yet. So I don't have to wait for a heart transplant donor anymore. Just print me one, please. I don't know if that's quite possible just yet. But what will this make us into the future? Our fundamental humanness, our thoughts, how we associate, how my body works. If more and more of my thoughts are uploadable to the cloud, downloadable from the cloud, if parts of my body are artificial, more and more of it, am I still, strictly speaking, Homo sapien? We are busy creating two kinds of people. And I'll touch on that in a slide or so from now. Normal people like us, and then the more cyborg people. And this, again, is a reality. It's not science fiction. It's not scaremongering. The fundamental nature of humanness into the next 2 or 3 generations will fundamentally change. Some people talk about a potential post-human society, utopian society, where our longevity increases, where more people have access to healthcare, where we automatically generate babies and program what they should look like. Imagine on your Uber app, Uber Eats or Uber Babies. So I want a 6'3", dark, and tall and handsome boy, etc., etc. And we just engineer that for you, okay? So Yuval Noah Harari, many of you might have heard of him. He wrote 3 incredible books. The first one was *Sapiens*, then he wrote *Homo Deus*, and then he wrote 21 Lessons for the 21st Century. He's a professor at Oxford. It is interesting that one of the most important voices on this technology is an historian and philosopher, and not a technology guru from Google or Facebook or something. For interest's sake, the 2 most important and most likely sought after roles into the future of this technology are ethicists and philosophers. Because we are creating things that will result in things that we've never had to think about before. Designer babies, okay? Imagine the Nazis had this technology, because they got rid of all the what was the word they used? But oh my God, I can't remember the word now, but you know what I mean. But the unsuitables. So gypsies, Freemasons, obviously the Jewish story we know about. But will we be able to use this technology again? Maybe not with building concentration camps, but stopping the access of healthcare or credit to certain people because they are not on our side, because they're fully human, they're not part of the cyborg generation, for instance. Okay. He writes about the potential creation of a useless class. Now, remember that slide where I showed the various industrial revolutions? One of the most controversial topics is jobs displacements with this technology. A lot of people will say, rightly so, that in every industrial revolution, yes, initially there was a lot of job losses because now donkey cart drivers had to learn how to be train drivers, as an example, all right? But at the end of that industrial revolution, the net effect was that millions of jobs, new jobs were created, okay? And when I speak on this topic, because I'm convinced we are heading for this, a useless class, people across the world without jobs in the next 20 or 30 years, potentially, then a lot of people will bring up those stats, and maybe they're right, but say, but in any industrial revolution, yes, right now we're automating away, especially back office administrative kind of tasks with robotic process automation. We can upskill those people again. I would still like to see how we upskill millions and millions of people in a world where we are constantly going to have to upskill. Even if you think right now you're quite an expert in your field, we have to constantly pivot, constantly learn, because technology is changing how we work and our roles in our organizations and the like. So what Harari is saying is, because of the fact that some people will have access to longevity, better healthcare, body part replacements and the like, and that will only be the elite and the super rich, most people on Earth will be left behind, all right, with our jobs. Now imagine that societal upheaval. And again, I don't want to depress you this morning. I'm just saying we might go there. In the next few years, we still have a chance to regulate this technology. I wrote 2 pieces for Business Day a few weeks ago. The one was a utopian view where I imagine my son in 35 years would write a letter to me and my counterparts who work on this technology, thanking us for the fact that we've regulated it early on, that we made sure that the biases were removed from the data, that all people on Earth had access to it, and we're living in this utopian society. Now, theoretically, that is possible with this technology. My follow-on article was a dystopian view, where he wrote back to me in 35 years saying, why did you not do more? We are being tracked and controlled. We've got implants in our brains. Unless we toe the party line, we can't do anything. We don't have the healthcare and the access that a lot of others might have and the like. Really just some things to think about. But in this industrial revolution, we are already not able to upskill people fast enough. It's because it's not just, because what do you do if you're an administrative person for 20 years? Okay, we're going to get rid of you unless in the next 6 weeks you learn how to code. Okay? How are we going to do that? That's something I grapple with a lot in the work I do. A lot of my work from a consulting point of view is automation, smart automation, using algorithms and AI to better automate processes. I'll also touch on that in the next few minutes. Most of those meetings start with a so-called FTE reduction, full-time equivalents. Have you heard that word before? It's a more neutral way to talk about people with lives and families. Okay, because we call a wage earner a full-time equivalent. It's kind of a consulting billing term. Or we talk about human resources. I've sat in many meetings in a boardroom with senior execs. Now they're drawing all kinds of fancy things on the whiteboard about how we're going to automate this and this and that. And the business case is if we get rid of half or third or whatever of our workforce, if we take that salary bill for the next year, we can actually fund this. And they come up with all these things. And I, as a rule, and I don't care if I have to go bankrupt, I do not deal with customers like that unless I can convince them. You cannot take the human being and the importance of human beings out of our world and out of your business. And like I said earlier, yes, you've got targets and shareholders, and we're not running la la land, okay? But if the conversation starts with, I need to get rid of people, I always walk away because it's unethical and it is stupid. Because I then ask customers, are you not planning to grow? And the example I use is, imagine you've got 100 people now. By automating their work, by empowering them with the right kind of data and dashboards and the like, you can most likely get 80 people to do the work that the 100 people were doing. And that's the typical approach. And then I say, but how much do you think you're going to grow in the next year or two? So let's turn it around. If in a year from now you need 150 people to do the work that the 100 are doing right now, probably, then by automating and empowering the 100 people, you theoretically don't have to employ more people. So that's the other way to look at it. Keep those people. How many times have I not seen, and I'm sure you've seen it as well, people who work in your team who work for you with the right kind of inspiration, maybe a bit of training, some mentorship. We have up-and-coming stars in our organizations, often. Now, yes, some people you can drag the horse to the water and not make a drink kind of thing. But most people, look, I think most people, most of us, all of us hopefully, wake up in the morning to go and do a good job. You want to feel appreciated. You want to feel, it's obviously, yes, you want to earn money to pay for your bills and for your kids' school and all of that. But there's a lot more to work, the sacredness of work, than just going somewhere, doing stuff, getting some money because you did this stuff. Such a big part of our lives is our careers and the people we mix with. I want to feel appreciated. I want to be able to share my ideas, even if some of them are a bit stupid. In most companies I've worked with, those things will never happen. Because a lot of business leaders, for me, seem to be quite narcissistic, egotistic. Can we automate that away? Unfortunately, we can't. So always start with a people-first approach, because this is what might happen, is what do we do with those people that we no longer need? All right. I don't have that answer, but we have to grapple with it, at least. All right, almost there. Let's make it a little bit more practical, and I wish I could spend a few hours in workshops on this slide. So I'm going to give you just a few ideas of what I've seen in my experience using this technology. We're going to bring it closer to home within the field that most of you work in. Most of what I'm going to share, you will most likely think, that's quite common sense, okay? Because a lot of it is common sense. Again, people go to these incredible technological conferences. I remember I worked for a bank once, a few years back, and our chief information officer was sponsored to go to Silicon Valley with this big vendor, this big consulting firm. And they went to meet Google and Facebook and Alibaba and a lot of these interesting startups and stuff. And Spotify, many of you most likely use Spotify on your phones for music. Spotify developed this model through which you can do software engineering, and they spoke about tribes and guilds, and it's just a very innovative way of delivering software. So they came back, this delegation, to our 110-year-old bank with 40,000 people, okay? And they said we should Spotify this bank. And that's what happened in a week or two, according to them. One of the things they did is, I think we had about 400 project managers, and they changed all of their titles by the click of an HR button to Scrum Masters. And if you know software delivery or lean principles, a project manager and a Scrum Master is a fundamentally different skill set and experience. But they came back to Spotify the bank. It was decided at the top, and the rest of us had to fall into line. The other example I quickly want to use before I get into this is a hospital group I did some work with about a year ago. Again, the execs called us in, whiteboard session. One of the things they wanted to automate is the front desk. You know, when you walk into the hospital, either to book a doctor or to see a doctor, or you're there for your operation or whatever, a lot of people are not comfortable or are in pain when they walk in. So there's all kinds of ideas, and they had a lot of technological firms giving them advice about the kind of stuff, the AI stuff, the robotic stuff, to automate pretty much all these jobs away. Okay, and so I already had a bit of a problem in that meeting. And then I asked them, have you actually spoken with any of these people whose jobs this will impact? They said, no, we haven't. Because, I mean, those people are they're not important. You know, they're low-wage earners, they're the administrative people. Who cares about them? We can just get rid of them, okay? Man, did I struggle in that meeting, okay. So I said, give me permission to interview 20 of your front desk staff. So we're going to tell them, because they already know what you're doing in any case. The people are not stupid. They most likely all have their CVs out already or are worrying about their jobs. I said, I'd just love to hear from them what would make their lives and their jobs better. Okay. And that changed this whole engagement, because I met with 20 people, and the things that would impact their jobs positively, we would never even have imagined. It's not tech, it's not robots, it's not AI. You know what's one of the most simple things we fixed to up their productivity? The printer was too far from their desks. And in one client engagement, they often had to get up 3 or 4 times to go get the printer, come back, have it signed. It wasn't AI that figured that out, okay? So a lot of in your own businesses, think of this. You have to know this technology, as I've already said. But don't lose common sense. So luckily in that engagement, we did a number of things to rearrange the office and the setup and where people walked and where the printers were. But we also had some innovative ideas from some of these people about, but what if we, you know, this spreadsheet that I have to fill in, then I have to go here and stuff, what if you can automate, just things that engagement would have been a total failure if we did not speak with the actual people whose jobs it would influence. So that's one of the key things I want you to take away here. There's a lot of talent in your teams, most likely. There are some great ideas and maybe there's not always a culture or confidence to share some of those ideas, even at the risk of being laughed at, even at the risk of half of the ideas being really stupid, where some of them might game change your business totally. And when you start implementing more and more of this technology, bring people on the journey with you. You cannot automate human nature. You cannot automate stupidity. Always remember that. Okay, so let's just, again, I've got less than 20 minutes left. I'm going to give you some trends, again, at the risk of sounding like a university professor. Most of this is from Gartner, but you know, there's a lot of sources. And in fact, some of the workshops I've been in earlier, there were also some really great information on this. But when you read this, just think about, okay, depending on the specific company you work for, that you run, look at some of these statistics. So what's that? 4 years from now, 75% of large enterprises will have adopted some form of intralogistics, smart robots in their warehouse operations. We're talking more and more about autonomous technology. Autonomy means without human intervention. We get more and more of these, and again, whether it's software robots or industrial robots like warehousing robots. You know, in the past, they're programmed to do a thing. There's a box, I take it, I make sure the weight is correct, I move here and I put it down and it goes onto a conveyor belt or something. They essentially do what humans do at a very elementary level. But what if they can learn from what they do? What if the robot can say, but I'm picking up this box, and rather than taking it there, it actually would make more sense if I put it here and communicate with other devices. And through the learning and the, if you would, wisdom, if you could use that word, of all the devices, create better processes autonomously. Self-driving cars is a great example. You know, if you as a driver, me as a driver, we learn. We learn how to drive in the dark. We've learned from some almost accidents we've had, or accidents we've had. You'll hopefully and most likely will never repeat that mistake again, you know. How many times have I not sit on my cell phone because I'm getting bored on the highway? I'll put my cell phone away now. It's a horrible temptation to look at it. But if you have 100,000 self-driving cars, like Tesla, for instance, then the cars all learn from each other because they're all on the same network. because they're using computer vision to see, is that a pedestrian or is that a stop sign in front of me? But if they make a mistake and something happens, that learning is spread across the whole fleet of cars, so that mistake don't happen again. That's the power of this technology. But imagine in your warehouse, in your facility where you process some of these things, that these devices can operate more and more without you and learn by themselves. That brings us back to what do we do with the people that used to do those things. But this technology is already there. Again, in 4 years, more than 75% of commercial supply chain management application vendors will deliver embedded advanced analytics, AI, and data science. We can also call it predictive analytics. You know, we would typically use data and dashboards to get an historical view, and based on that, look at trends and stuff and make decisions for the future. That is very valid. But what if you can take all that data that you harvest from your operations, from your staff, hopefully from your customers, and you can very accurately predict that into the future? That technology already exists. Make much better decisions through that. Is it always perfect? No. Do you sometimes need your experience to know that the algorithms are making a mistake? Or your gut feel even, because you've done this so many times? Absolutely. Are you on this journey already? Do you even feel you need to be on this journey? And that's an important point. In some businesses, you don't need all this stuff, as long as you're aware of it. Excel is one of the best tools you can use to automate a lot of the work you do. Okay, you don't need AI, you just need to use Excel right, or API calls as they call it and the like. So you might walk out of here today and say, hey, that stuff is not applicable, and you most likely could be right. That's okay. Don't listen to all the consultants like me that try and sell this stuff to you if you know you don't need it, but also learn enough about it so that you know when you need it or what element of these things you need. 25% of supply chain execution vendors will have rewritten their core application as a microservice architecture, but only 5% of supply chain organizations will have adapted a true composability. Now, for this morning, I tried to figure out what that word, not what it meant, how to say it. But again, it comes back to this environment, this ecosystem of smart devices, whether it is software, bots, or whether it's hardware, industrial bots or the like. So now, is that 5% prediction because some might not need it? I think that's possible. Is that prediction based on some might not know that they need it, but they do? Again, I'm actually not really going to give you many answers today. If I can make you think, if I can make you think of a few things you haven't thought of before, but the context of your own business and your own industry is very important rather than just this. This is what we consultants do. We give you a lot of great slides, okay? We actually scare you a little bit, and then we try and make you realize that we're the only people who can fix this. Okay. I'm not that person. You know why? Because I was competing with a lot of these big consulting firms for many years, and then the bank that I spoke about employed me in one of their divisions to manage their vendors. So I had 17 vendors. One was my previous employer. The others were all previous competitors. I had a 700 million rand budget. Now, I was working in a subdivision of group technology of the bank. My budget was 700 million rand, okay? It speaks more about inefficiencies and not procuring or contracting correctly than anything else. But I remember now all these vendors, now I did this, but now I saw it from the other side of the desk for the first time, especially the big global vendors. And I'm sure you've seen this, might even have done it. First slide is a world map with all kinds of dots. That's all our offices. We're a global firm, okay? We are a $40 billion company. We've got 400,000 people. And then because we're a bank, they would say, we deal with Deutsche Bank and HSBC and Bank of America and stuff. And I remember those, and all of them did almost exactly the same thing, okay? Because they want to impress me. And I used to do this too. Now, on the other side of the desk as the customer, I remember my only thought was, so flippin' what? I mean, I don't care if you deal with HSBC or Deutsche Bank or whatever. I mean, I worked for one of the bigger banks in South Africa, which is comparatively little compared to these other banks. So you have to listen through the BS of consulting firms. Some of what they say could be very relevant and very true. One of the best vendors I dealt with in that role, from maybe one of the biggest consulting firms in the world, a guy called Phil. We would discuss some of the problems we were dealing with. And he would honestly say, you know what? I don't think we can help you. We don't have the know-how to do that. Or of these 10 things, these 2 we've done before, we've got some case studies. I don't know how to do that. And we built such a great relationship because he didn't give me consulting BS, you know. And no offense, but these Indian firms, you know, well, they would, and not just them, but they, no matter what problem you give them, they would say, yes, we can do it. You know, we can do it. And then, and I've done this before, then on the way back to the office, we say, shit, guys, how are we going to do this? Okay. So just make sure that you know more about a lot of your consulting firms or vendors about the important topics, or at least enough to know when they're trying to pull the wool over your eyes. And that was a bit of a side note, and it's for free. 25% of supply chain decisions will be made across intelligent edge ecosystems. You most likely know what edge is. We speak a lot about the Internet of Things, you know, devices, sensors. Again, from a logistics or a warehouse point of view, or whether it's the railroads, we've got, for years we've had devices sending us signals, weather devices and the like. Less than 10 minutes, so. And then we're going to have a break, and you can go and jump off the building after I've depressed you so much. Please don't. Okay. What is the difference these days in what you call edge computing? The actual processing power is in the device. So it's not just the device that sends the temperature or the wear and tear or whatever it is to a central station where we've got spreadsheets and graphs and we decide, you know, maybe the whole fleet of trucks or that part of the fleet needs to go for a service again. These devices can actually process the data, but they can talk to each other and give each other instructions. That's what edge computing really is. It is revolutionizing our world, but it's also revolutionizing this industry that you're in. Again, autonomy, making decisions within perimeters, but by itself, without human intervention, a lot more accurate. They don't go on strike. They don't join unions. They don't get sick. But what do we do with the people that do go on strike and get sick and are just human? Have to grapple with that. Not far from done. I want to touch on these very quickly. Automation, field that I'm working in, just where we're going. And again, this is mostly software automation, although it can apply to some extent to industrial robots. We typically automate tasks. I get a request for a quote. I need to make sure that it is a registered customer. I need to make sure that they've paid up before we send them more stuff to buy from us, as an example. We need to check whether they've got early payment discounts, because that might influence how we price our product or service. A lot of manual stuff. That is already very easy to automate. We've got computer vision that can actually read the document, even if it's unstructured. You know, in the past, a typical purchase order would have a very specific format. Even now, if it's in a totally different format, and even if it's handwritten, and even if it's very badly handwritten, we already have the technology through machine learning to pick up what's happening there. I dealt with a mobile phone company locally. You know, all of their contracts needs to be printed and hand-signed, and then they scan it in, they archive it. So this contract was signed in their Midrand branch. But where the client had to write in, you know, signed at place, date, etc., the handwriting looked like Midway. The AI knew it was Midrand, even though the handwriting looked like Midway, because the context, it was a Midrand branch. All these other data points made sure that this image recognition, or OCR, or intelligent OCR, could pick up and extract the right data. Make decisions based on that data. So a lot of this can be already automated. Now it's more predictive. We actually have a lot of the processes that are automating itself based on what it's learning, and then we're going to get more and more cognitive automation where, and again, that's no humans involved, learning as it's going, making changes as it's going. So that's basic process automation. So again, think of how some of this can work in the fields that you're working in. Some pitfalls, now yes, they're real common sense stuff, but the amount of times I have to tell customers this is really shocking. Oops, let me go back. Automate the right things for the right reasons in the right ways. Now, can you get more simple than that? Why do you want to automate this thing? Can you even automate it, whether it's a specific business process or walking from here to there or carrying that thing from there or a forklift going from here to there? Do you have to automate it, and why? Do it in the right way. Start small. Make sure you get cadence. Make sure people in your organization can see that it's working. They get more excited about it. And for the right reasons. Again, the biggest problem here is the target from the top. you have to automate half your stuff from now on. Okay, where are you going to even start? What is the stuff? Which stuff do you start with? People grapple with this a lot. Use the technology that you have. Consultants will never say this. Because by the way, I can also sell you some licensing on this automation software. But a lot of the stuff, and I used Excel as an example. I mean, it's elementary in a way, although it's a powerful tool. But we will most likely have some software that we've acquired over the years. It's most likely we don't even know where it is anymore. But start with, what have you got? And can I use it? Because especially when it comes to initial or elementary automation, you can use, even if you're a Microsoft shop, for instance, a lot of their tools you can use and others, start with what you've got. Don't listen to the consultants and buy new shiny stuff, because you might not need it, okay? I've alluded to this, a people-first initiative, never a technology-first initiative. And the challenge here is the career planning, the upskilling, and also the organizational design. Because the whole way your corporate or your business operates, using this kind of technology might change the whole structure of the business, the way you recruit, where you put people in certain roles. So you have to think about that. So I often tell customers, AI. I say, okay, let's stop, let's step back. Do you know if your people are happy? Do you know what their career ambitions are? Do you know if they even have the basic skills or ambition to go into these roles that we're planning for them now? The technology comes last on this slide. It should always come last. It never, in my experience, comes last. It starts with the technology conversation. We haven't given any thought about how it's going to impact people. Can our people do it? Do we need to recruit people? Even in the supply chain industry, and I think it was alluded to earlier on some of the workshops, the kind of skills you will need into the future, given where technology is going, is most likely a big topic. I don't know if you'd agree. Where would you get these people? We've got a massive problem in this country regarding skills. You know, I mean, now that we are used to working remotely, we speak about this brain drain, and we see it in technology, specifically people who pack them and go somewhere, Australia, England, or wherever. I mean, I'm starting in the beginning of next month to lecture at a university in India, 60 hours a month. I'm going to lecture their MBA students about digital technology. Paying me in dollars, that's very nice. I'm not going anywhere. Some people want to leave for very specific reasons, which I respect. Now I'm not worried about visas anymore. And I can do it in the comfort of my home, in my pajamas, because they're 3.5 hours ahead. So I'll do it from 6 a.m. to 9 in the mornings. So imagine what it's going to do to the brain drain even more so, especially in the skilled and the technology field. People who can't get visas, who might not want to leave because they might not want to displace their children, school. Now it's so much easier. So the kind of people we either need to find or the way we upskill our own people is a very important topic. Common sense, and I've got some ideas on that, but that's another 4 hours conversation. At least think about it. Almost done. So simple. Start with your business objectives. I almost feel ashamed of sharing this because you all are smart people, I would like to think. Okay. Again, technology bandwagon. I say, like I said, I've got the meeting, we want to use AI. To do what? Okay, to automate what? One of the investment banks there in Sandton, their HR or human capital management team asked me to do a talk to them about AI, where it's going. And there are some fascinating case studies about how you can better serve your employees, how you can better train them. You know, a lot of this corporate training is really one size fits all, know your customer, how not to click on links that you don't trust, and all that stuff. But you can really customize the delivery of training to people because of you understand how they interact with your systems, you understand them. Some people would rather listen to an audiobook, for instance. Some people would want to see pictures and mind mapping. Others would want to read a book. So, and then when it comes from recruitment all the way to exiting, that whole process can be managed with AI. So investment bank, and my experience, I don't know, when I work for a bank, I don't know how they open their doors every day. And this is going to sound bad, but the amount of stupidity, okay, the amount of wrong decisions is astounding. So I asked this team, I said, okay, you don't have to go into detail, but just give me, on the whiteboard, the 5 steps, the main steps that people go through when they work for you. How they initially submit their CVs, the interview process, etc., onboarding, training, etc., all the way through to maybe they're leaving or going on pension or whatever. They couldn't draw on the board. Because none of these execs, and there were 13 in the room, investment bank, all drive very big cars and very big salaries, they could not explain their most basic processes. So their idea to get rid of this problem was to AI it. Okay. No. We start with process engineering, etc. So it's common sense. Okay, less than 1 minute, almost done. I alluded to this already. The problem with automation, especially robotic process automation, is we just look at tasks that people do. Automate that whole value chain and aim for efficiencies and effectiveness gains. It's easy also to put a financial number to that. But to say, I'm just going to walk faster to the printer and come back, yes, it makes my job better. But can you see that on the balance sheet? No, most likely not. Look at the whole value chain and automate that, not just certain tasks in isolation. See, common sense stuff. Choose the right partners. I've said a lot about consultants like me. Listen carefully, upskill yourself, make sure you know what they're talking about. Partner with vendors in a win-win engagement. Often that's not the case. They just come and deliver stuff to you. Your staff's not upskilled. You're not really left with any IP. You get that invoice. They give you a pack of papers like this, which is their report, which you're never going to look at in any case. So the way we procure and engage with vendors should be different. All right. So I am done, and I'm going to finish with Orwell again. I started there, and I'm coming back. Thank you, and I hope I didn't bore you. I can do a bit of a university lecture thing sometimes. So takeouts for me. The way you view this technology will impact how you will embrace it or not. We have to upskill ourselves in how we use this technology and what it is about, even if we don't want to become technological experts. All right. This technology is advancing very fast, but there are things that it can't do. Human nature, empathy, the value of our people, and the like. You can't automate that. Make sure that you automate for the right reasons, the right things. Make sure you partner with your vendors, if you do that, in a strategic way that you both benefit, but that you get what you really pay for. And our operational day-to-day work will more and more be automated through smart devices that makes its own decisions and the like. How do we upskill our people for that future? How do we upskill ourselves? Hopefully it's more positive than a negative message. This technology can really serve us, but let's not go blindly into it, thinking it will never harm us. And with that university lecture, and with half of you almost looking asleep, there's a break coming now. I say thank you very much for the opportunity. Thank you.